Most of us have a family that we love and cannot fully fix. There is the cousin nobody talks to anymore, and nobody quite remembers why. There is the holiday dinner where one chair has stayed empty for years. There is the brother who used to be your closest friend, and now you mostly know him through other people. There is the parent you forgive once a month and resent again by the end of the week. There is the message you have been meaning to send for 2 years that you still have not sent because you do not know what to say, and because once it is sent, it cannot be unsent. And underneath all of it, in a place most people never put into words, there is a quieter question. If my family cannot fix itself, can anything fix it? That is one of the oldest questions in the human heart. And there is a book in the Bible that was written very carefully for people who are asking it. It is the very first book. The book that almost everyone has heard of, and very few people have actually read all the way through. The book that gets called a collection of stories, when it is really one story, one long unbroken thread from the first morning of the world to a coffin in Egypt that is waiting to be carried home. It is the book of Genesis. And the strange and beautiful thing about Genesis is this: the family it traces, the family that God chooses to start the whole story with, is the most dysfunctional family in the Bible. It is not a clean family. It is not a holy family. It is not a family you would put on a Christmas card. It is brothers who hate each other. It is fathers who lie to kings about their wives. It is mothers who laugh at angels. It is uncles who cheat their nephews. It is sons sold into slavery by the very brothers who shared their dinner. And God does not pick another family to start over with. He does not wait for a better one to come along. He stays with this one all the way through, for 50 chapters, for almost 2,000 years of story time. And at the end of the book, he is still working through them. Genesis is the first piece of good news the Bible ever gives you. Your family is not too broken. Your story is not too tangled. The God of Genesis has done this before. Let me show you how the book holds together. Most people, when they pick up Genesis, see it as a string of disconnected stories. Creation, Adam and Eve, the flood, the Tower of Babel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. They feel like separate scenes from different movies, and for a long time, scholars taught that they were. They said Genesis was sewn together out of different sources by an editor who did not quite hide the seams. But if you sit with the book and read it straight through, something different starts to happen. You start to feel a rhythm. You start to notice the same words returning at the right moments. You start to see that the story of Abraham is answering the story of Adam. That the story of Joseph is answering the story of Cain. That the dust of chapter 2 and the dust of chapter 50 are the same dust. The book is one piece. And the way it holds together is not through a clever editor. It is through one small word that the book keeps planting and watching grow. The word is zera. Zera is the Hebrew word for seed. It is the same word a farmer would use for a handful of grain, the same word a gardener would use for what goes into the soil in spring. Genesis uses it more than 50 times, and almost every time it appears, the book is doing something quiet and important. It is reminding you that this whole story is about something that looks small and dead and ordinary, and is actually carrying the whole future inside it. A seed, when you put it in the ground, looks like nothing. It looks like it has been buried. It looks like it has been thrown away. For a while, the ground gives back no sign that anything is happening. And then, in a quiet way that no one quite watches happen, a green shoot comes up. And that green shoot is the beginning of a tree that will outlive the person who planted it. Genesis is a book about seeds. It is a book about beginnings that look small. It is a book about people who do not look like the future, who are doing things that do not look like the future, in places that do not look like the future, and the future is already inside them. Let me walk you through it. The story starts in a garden. In the first chapter of Genesis, on the third day of creation, God makes plants that bear seed and trees with fruit, with the seed inside the fruit, each one according to its kind. Genesis 1:11-12. It is a small detail. Most people read past it. But it is the first time the word seed appears in the Bible, and it is doing something important. It is telling you that from the very first week of the world, God designed the whole thing to be the kind of place where one small thing can grow into many. Creation is not a finished product. It is a planted field, and the field is built to keep producing. In the second chapter, the focus narrows. We are not looking at the cosmos anymore. We are in a garden, and God takes dust from the ground and forms a man and breathes into him the breath of life. The Hebrew word for that breath is neshama. It is the breath that turns dust into a soul. And the man is placed in a garden that is full of trees and given the work of keeping it. The first work given to a human being is gardening. We forget this. We talk about the fall, the snake, the fruit. But before any of that, before any of the trouble, the first job given to humanity was to plant and to keep, to live in the rhythm of seeds and harvests, to be the people who care for what is growing. And then chapter 3 happens. A snake. A question. A piece of fruit. A choice that should not have been made. The man and the woman eat from the one tree they were told not to eat from, and the moment their teeth break the skin of the fruit, something else breaks. Trust. The connection with God, the connection with each other. They go from being naked and unashamed in front of each other in chapter 2 to sewing leaves together to hide from each other in chapter 3. The first wound was not the fruit. The first wound was hiding. And in the middle of God's response, in the middle of the curse on the snake, there is a sentence that Christians have called for centuries the first whisper of the gospel. It is one line, almost easy to miss. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Genesis 3:15. The Hebrew word for offspring there is zera, seed. In other words, even in the moment when the world is falling apart, God says, the seed of the woman is going to crush you in the end. The very first promise made after the fall is a promise about a coming child, a coming son, a coming someone whose heel will be bruised, but whose foot will land on the head of the snake. The whole rest of the Bible is going to be the slow unfolding of who that seed is. And from this point on, Genesis is watching to see where the seed is going to come from. Cain and Abel are the next generation, the first two brothers in the world, and one of them kills the other in a field. The first death in the Bible is not from old age, it is from a brother. The seed almost ends right there, in the first family, in the first murder. What the book does next is what makes Genesis Genesis. It does not skip over the body of Abel and move on. It records the murder. It records the lie Cain tells God. It records the curse. It records that Cain goes off and builds the first city, names it after his son, and starts a civilization full of his own descendants. The Bible does not pretend the first generations were better than they were. It writes them down. And then, almost as a quiet footnote, the text says, "And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth, for she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel." That word offspring is zera again, seed. Eve looks at the empty place where Abel used to be and gives the next son a name that says, God has given me a new seed. She has buried one. She has been given another. The line continues. The seed is fragile, but it is not stopped. The generations roll on. Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. The earth fills up with violence. God grieves over what people are doing to each other and to the ground. And he chooses one man and his family to carry the seed through the flood. The story we know as a children's tale, with animals 2 by 2 on a wooden boat, is actually a story about a seed being protected. The water rises. The world is undone. Almost everything that breathes dies. And in one wooden box, riding on top of the water, is a small handful of people and a small handful of animals. And inside them, somewhere, is the seed of the woman that was promised in the garden. When the water goes down, Noah steps out onto dry ground and plants a vineyard. The first thing a survivor does is plant. The first sign that life is going on is a seed going into the ground. And then comes Babel, people learning to make bricks, people learning to build, people deciding that they can reach heaven by stacking things on top of each other. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Genesis 11:4. It is the first project in the Bible that humans run on their own initiative, on their own ambition, for their own name. And God comes down and scatters them. Their languages split, their families spread out across the earth. The seed is now hidden inside the noise of many nations, and most of them do not know it is there. And in the middle of that scattering, in one small corner of Mesopotamia, a man named Abram is told to leave home. His story is the second beginning of Genesis. After the first chapters cover the whole world, the book narrows to one family. God says to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing." And in the very next line, God uses a word the book has been keeping in reserve. "In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." The seed has found a new home. It is now inside a man named Abram, who is 75 years old and has no children. Abraham's story is strange for exactly that reason. He is given a promise that depends on a child at an age when most people stop expecting children. And he waits. He waits 25 years for the promise to begin to come true. He waits while Sarah laughs at the very idea. He waits while he tries to help God along by having a child with Hagar, and only makes the situation worse. He waits while the years pass and his body grows old. He waits, the book of Hebrews will say later, like a man who has considered himself as good as dead, Hebrews 11:12. And eventually, after the waiting that should have killed the promise, Isaac is born. And here, before we keep moving with the seed, there is one quiet moment in the middle of Abraham's story that I do not want you to walk past. The woman Abraham has the first child with, before Isaac, is Hagar. She is a slave. She is not chosen for the line. She is a way Abraham and Sarah try to help God along by their own efforts. And when their plan goes wrong, Sarah turns on her. Hagar runs away into the desert, pregnant, alone, with nothing. And in the middle of that desert, an angel finds her. The angel does not tell her she is wrong for running. The angel speaks to her by name and gives her a promise about her own son. And Hagar does something no one else in Genesis does. She gives God a name. She calls him the God who sees me. Genesis 16:13. It is the only place in the entire Bible where a human being is the one who names God. The seed of the world's blessing is not running through her, but God sees her anyway. He sees the woman who is not chosen. He sees the slave who is running. He sees the child who is not the heir. The Bible takes a whole chapter to make sure you know this. If you have ever felt like the side character in someone else's story, Hagar is in the book for you. The God of Genesis is also the God of the people who are not the main line. The seed is here. The seed is named. The seed is a small boy running around in the desert with his elderly parents, who almost cannot believe he is real. And then, in chapter 22, God tells Abraham to take that seed and lay him on an altar. This is the part of Abraham's story that has shocked readers for thousands of years. The God who promised the child is now asking for the child. And Abraham, the text says quietly, gets up early in the morning and saddles his donkey and starts walking. What I notice when I read it slowly is what is not in the story. There is no argument. There is no bargaining. There is the long silence of 3 days walking, and a son who carries the wood up the hill on his own back, and a father who answers his son's one question in a way that is almost too honest to bear. Isaac says, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" And Abraham says, "God will provide for himself the lamb, my son." Genesis 22, 7-8. And then, at the last moment, when the knife is in the air, God stops him. And there, caught in a thicket, is a ram. The ram is sacrificed in the place of the son. And Abraham names the place, "The Lord will provide." Genesis 22:14. The seed is spared. The promise is intact. And the mountain where this happened is the same mountain, the text will quietly tell us later in Chronicles, where the Temple of Jerusalem will one day be built. And it is also, by tradition, the area where, about 2,000 years later, another father will not stop his son from being laid on the wood. The father in chapter 22 stops the knife. The father in the Gospels does not. Because by then, the seed is not Isaac, the seed is Jesus. And the heel is bruised, and the head is crushed, on the same hill where Abraham first heard a ram in the bushes. Genesis does not say all of that out loud. Genesis just lays the picture down and lets it wait for the rest of the Bible to come and pick it up. The seed passes from Abraham to Isaac, and from Isaac to twin sons, Esau and Jacob, the strong one and the smaller one, the hunter and the man who likes to stay near the tents. And, in one of the more uncomfortable details in the book, the smaller and quieter one is the one God chooses to carry the line forward. The seed of the world's blessing is going to come through the brother who deceives his blind father to steal his brother's blessing. Notice something strange about Genesis here. God does not pick the obvious son. He never picks the obvious son. He picks Isaac instead of Ishmael. He picks Jacob instead of Esau. He picks Joseph instead of Reuben. He picks Judah, the brother with the most stained record, instead of any of the more impressive sons of Jacob. The seed keeps running through the line of the unlikely. The seed keeps choosing the one nobody would have chosen. If your family has ever made you feel like the wrong child, the overlooked one, the one who is not the favored heir, Genesis is quietly telling you something. The seed of the whole story almost always comes through the side most people would not have bet on. There is a small chapter tucked inside the Joseph story that almost no one preaches. It is Genesis 38. The book is in the middle of telling you about Joseph in Egypt, and then it suddenly stops and tells you about Joseph's older brother Judah back in Canaan. Judah's sons die. Judah refuses to let his daughter-in-law Tamar marry his third son because he is afraid the third one will die too. Tamar is left a widow with no future and no children. So she dresses as a prostitute, sits at the side of a road, and tricks Judah, her own father-in-law, into sleeping with her. She becomes pregnant. Judah is furious until he realizes the child is his. And Tamar has twins. One of them is named Perez. It is one of the most uncomfortable chapters in the Bible, and it is in the family tree of Jesus. When Matthew opens the New Testament, the very first chapter, he lists the genealogy of Christ, and he names the mothers. He names Tamar. He names Rahab. He names Ruth. He names the wife of Uriah. The seed of Jesus runs through the women that polite religion does not mention in public. Genesis 38 is not a detour. It is the book quietly insisting one more time that the seed of the promise is being carried by people who do not look like the kind of people you would expect a promise to be carried by. If your story has chapters in it that you do not want to read out loud, Genesis is the book that says, I have chapters like that too, and the seed is still in them. Jacob himself is a portrait of the messy life God uses anyway. He is a deceiver. He spends 20 years working for an uncle who out-deceives him. He has a complicated marriage, more than one wife, more than one mother of his children. He limps for the rest of his life after wrestling with a stranger by a river at night. And in the morning after that wrestling, the stranger gives him a new name, Israel, the one who strives with God. The seed now has a new name on it. The promise that started with Abram is now the promise of Israel. And Israel has 12 sons, and the favorite son of Jacob is named Joseph. Joseph is the story most people half remember from childhood. The colored coat, the dreams, the brothers who throw him in a pit and sell him to traders going down to Egypt, the years in slavery, the years in prison, the dreams of Pharaoh that no one can interpret, the sudden rise to second in command of the most powerful kingdom in the world. But underneath the drama, Genesis is doing something with Joseph that ties the whole book together. Think about the path Joseph walks. His brothers throw him into a pit. The pit is in the ground. Then he is sold to a caravan and carried down to Egypt, lower than the land where his father is. Then he is bought by an Egyptian official and ends up serving in his house. Then he is falsely accused and thrown into prison, lower still, underground. Each step takes him farther from home, farther from the promise, farther from anyone who knows who he is. And the book keeps repeating one quiet line at every level. The Lord was with Joseph. Genesis 39:2, 39 21. The Lord is with him in the pit. The Lord is with him in slavery. The Lord is with him in prison. The Lord is with him when the cupbearer he helped forgets him for 2 more years, and the months stretch, and the windows are small, and the days are all the same. The Bible does not say Joseph felt the Lord every day. It does not say Joseph understood why this was happening. It says the Lord was with him. The two are not the same. The seed is being buried. That is what is happening. Jacob's family, the family that carries the promise of God's blessing for all nations, is starving in Canaan. Famine is closing in. The seed of the woman is about to be wiped out by hunger. And one of Jacob's sons, the one his brothers hated and sold, is sitting in the palace of Egypt with 7 years of stored grain ready for them. And when the brothers come, terrified, hungry, sure he will kill them, Joseph weeps. And he says one of the most important sentences in the whole book. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. He does not say their evil was not evil. He does not minimize the well, the slavery, the prison, the years. He says they did one thing. God did another thing through the same act. And the thing God did is keeping people alive right now. That sentence is the heart of Genesis. A book that begins with a fruit eaten in a garden ends with grain stored in a granary. A book that begins with a brother killing a brother ends with a brother feeding his brothers. A book that begins with a hand snatching what is not its to take ends with a hand opening to share what has been stored for years. The seed went into the ground in chapter 37, in a pit in Canaan, in a deal worth 20 pieces of silver. And the seed came up in Egypt and fed a starving world. If you have ever wondered why the Bible spends so much time on Joseph, this is why. He is the picture, drawn in real time, of what the rest of the book has been hinting at. The seed has to go into the ground. The seed has to look dead. The seed has to be hidden away long enough that people forget about it. And then the seed comes up, and the world eats. Genesis ends with Joseph dying in Egypt as an old man. And his last words are not about himself. He says, God will surely visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Carry my bones up from here. Genesis 50, 24-25. That is the last sentence in the book. A coffin in Egypt, bones waiting, a seed still in the ground, a promise that has been moved one more generation forward and is still, at the close of the book, not fully kept. The book ends in the middle. It ends with everyone waiting. And that is exactly the point. Because the seed of the woman is not finished growing yet. The seed of Abraham is not finished growing yet. Israel is in Egypt and does not yet know that 400 years of slavery and a man named Moses and a Red Sea and a wilderness and a promised land are coming. Israel does not yet know that far in the future, in a small town in that promised land, a girl named Mary will be told by an angel that the seed of the woman is finally going to arrive, and his name will be Jesus. When Paul writes to the Galatians, he says it almost as a side comment. The promises were made to Abraham and to his offspring. It does not say, and to offsprings, referring to many, but referring to one, and to your offspring, who is Christ. The seed, all along, was a person. The promise to Abram on a starry night, the promise on Mount Moriah, the promise carried in Joseph's coffin, the promise hiding in a stable in Bethlehem, was one promise about one person. There is one more small picture in the very last chapters of the book that ties it all together. Joseph's father Jacob is dying. Joseph brings his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to receive their grandfather's blessing. Jacob is nearly blind. Joseph carefully places the older son, Manasseh, under Jacob's right hand, and the younger son, Ephraim, under his left, so the firstborn will get the right-handed blessing. And Jacob, half blind, crosses his hands. He puts his right hand on the younger boy, and his left hand on the older one. Joseph tries to correct him. Jacob refuses. He knows what he is doing. He says, "I know, my son, I know." Genesis 48:19. One more time, in the last act of the book, the seed jumps over the obvious son and lands on the unlikely one. Jacob, who once stole his own brother's blessing by tricking his blind father, ends his life by reversing the pattern with full sight of what he is doing. He has lived long enough to know what God does. And here is what that means for you. Your story is also a seed story. It does not always look like it. There are stretches where it feels like nothing is growing. There are months, sometimes years, when the soil seems empty. There is a season of being thrown in a pit by people who were supposed to love you. There is a season of working hard for a future that keeps getting deferred. There is a season of being forgotten in prison, while the people who promised to remember you live their lives. There is a season of being old and barren and laughing bitterly at promises you cannot believe anymore. Genesis is the book that says, that is what a seed looks like. A seed buried looks like a failure. A seed planted looks like a thing thrown away. The waiting that follows the planting feels like nothing is happening. And then, in a way nobody quite watches happen, a green thing comes up. And the green thing is the beginning of a future much bigger than the soil that hid it. The God of Genesis is not a God who works only with neat families and tidy resumes. He is a God who works through brothers who hate each other, and parents who pick favorites, and uncles who cheat, and prisons that hold the wrong person too long. He has been doing this since the third day of the world. He plants, he waits. He carries the seed through people who do not deserve to carry it. He carries the seed through families that are barely holding together. He carries the seed through silences that last for centuries. He is still doing it. He is doing it through your family right now. The brother who has not spoken to you in 2 years is not the end of your story. The chair that has been empty at the table is not the end of your story. The text message you cannot bring yourself to send is not the end of your story. Your parents are not the end of your story. Your mistakes are not the end of your story. Genesis is the book that takes the most broken people the Bible can find and follows them for 50 chapters and shows you that God was carrying the seed through them the whole time. You are not too far gone for that. Your family is not too far gone for that. The same God who picked Jacob over Esau, and Joseph over his older brothers, and Judah over the more impressive sons. The same God who let the seed get sold into Egypt before he let it save the world, is the God who is still planting today. He is patient with the soil. He is patient with the waiting. He is patient with the long years where it looks like nothing is happening. He knows what a seed looks like before it comes up. And maybe, if you can let yourself, you can do the same thing in your own family right now that Joseph did at the end of his story. You can decide not to wait until everything is fair before you sit down at the table again. You can decide to feed the people who let you down. You can decide to give your story the kind of meaning that does not depend on the people who hurt you ever fully understanding what they did. The seed in your story is not waiting for them to catch up. The seed is in your hands now, in the way you choose to keep planting. The book of Genesis has been trying to tell you this from the very first chapter. The God who took dust and breathed it into a soul. The God who walked through the cool of the garden looking for hiding people. The God who clothed Adam and Eve himself when their leaves were not enough. The God who built an ark and watched a vineyard come up out of mud. The God who called a 75-year-old man out of the city of his fathers. The God who saw Hagar in the wilderness. The God who stopped the knife on the mountain. The God who blessed the smaller son and the deceiver and the prostitute in the family tree. The God who was with a man in a pit and a man in a prison and a man in the second chair of Egypt is the same God who knows your name right now. He planted you. He has been planting through your family for longer than anyone in your family has been alive. He has not stopped. So if this helped you see the book of Genesis more clearly, subscribe for more Bible explanations that show how the whole story points to Jesus. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, someone who feels like the overlooked sibling, someone whose family is more broken than the Christmas card lets on, someone who has been waiting on a promise for so long that they have started to wonder if it was ever real, share this with them. They may need to hear what the book of Genesis has been saying all along. The seed is not lost. The promise is not finished. The God who planted you is still tending the field. You were never the end of the story. You were always the beginning of one.